Hello and welcome. This video deals with the issue of multi-stakeholder cooperatives in connection with the book Cooperativism at Work. As I will try to explain to you, this is an issue which is of importance to the cooperative movement as a whole. You can find a general presentation about the book and videos on part of its studies on the YouTube channel, which is also called Cooperativism at Work. I encourage you to subscribe to the channel so that you can easily find out when a new video comes out. So today I'm going to talk to you about the cooperatives that have different categories of members, each category having a substantial amount of votes in the cooperative. They are called multi-stakeholder cooperatives because they group different types of stakeholders or interest groups from a given community. The case studies of the book have been selected among worker-owned cooperatives, by which we mean worker cooperatives and social cooperatives, where the workers are either the only or the majority category of members with exclusive or majority voting power. Without being fully fledged multi-stakeholder cooperatives, some of the cooperatives described in the book show a trend to incorporate other stakeholders than the workers, like the clients, for example, into the membership, or at least to take into account permanently and institutionally the opinion of other stakeholders, like the subscriber to a newspaper, for example. Beyond its case studies, the book also reports a very marked trend among the expanding social cooperative movement across the world to create a fully fledged multi-stakeholder governance, granting a substantial amount of representation and voting power to other stakeholders than the workers. I'll come back to it in a few minutes. The multi-stakeholder model can also take the form of groups or consortia of cooperatives that include different types of cooperatives representing different categories of members. This is the case of the Mondragon group described in the book, which has a few cooperatives where the majority is in the hands of other stakeholders than the workers, whereas most cooperatives in Mondragon are worker cooperatives. In another example from Spain, which is not in the book, the health cooperative group Fundación Esprio does not include the salaried workers of its constituent cooperatives, but it does differentiate the doctors from the patients as distinct stakeholders in distinct cooperatives within the same group. This is another example showing that you can also organize a multi-stakeholder governance through a cooperative group rather than through a single cooperative. So now, what are the origins of multi-stakeholder cooperativism? As far as historical evidence can show, cooperative communities with specific rules anticipating the present cooperative principles emerged as far back as the 17th century and probably even earlier. This is explained in another video on the cooperative principles in the same YouTube channel called Cooperativism at Work. These early cooperative communities had the same members meeting different needs through the same cooperative community. But not all members in a cooperative community had the same needs, or at least not all at the same level. Some needed employment as a priority. For others, the most pressing need was to build a house or to obtain a loan. So, although there were not multi-stakeholders cooperatives as yet, they already strived to meet different needs that different members had, and in this way, they already contained the seeds that would later lead to multi-stakeholder cooperatives. Then in 1844, a consumer cooperative called the Equitable Pioneers of Rochdale was established near Manchester. This cooperative is widely considered to have created the first cooperative principles, which is not exactly the case as I explained in the other video I just mentioned, and which focuses on cooperative principles in the same YouTube channel. What is less known is that the founders of that very well-known cooperative considered since the beginning that they should somehow provide employment to their members as much as possible and include the workers in manufacturing cooperatives that they would establish. This idea was present in their first rules, called precisely Law the First, which proposed, and I quote, to commence the manufacture of such articles as the society may determine upon, for the employment of such members as may be without employment, or who may be suffering in consequence of repeated reduction in their wages, end quote. Then in the 1860s, the Equitable Pioneers of Rochdale tried to apply this principle of including the workers as an identifiable and distinct group in the membership of a cooperative, which they established to produce a part of the foodstuff they sold, and which had different types of members, such as consumer cooperatives, including the Equitable Pioneers of Rochdale themselves, as well as the workers of that new cooperative. This was an early attempt at creating a multi-stakeholder cooperative. Unfortunately, in the end, and in spite of stronger efforts by the pioneers of Rochdale themselves, this experiment proved unsuccessful in including the workers into the membership for reasons that are explained in the book. But basically, it showed that neither the Equitable Pioneers of Rochdale nor the British cooperative movement as a whole were ready as yet to effectively organize a cooperative governance with distinct interest groups being represented. Another reason is that the original phenomenon of multifunctional cooperative communities was then gradually giving way to a trend towards specialization between different types of cooperatives like consumer cooperatives and worker cooperatives. But the idea of the multi-stakeholder cooperative, including the workers as a distinctive category of members in non-worker cooperatives, was born. The idea was then the object of a large national debate within the British cooperative movement during the 1880s and 90s, with spillovers abroad. It used the code name of profit sharing, meaning with the workers, which also meant power sharing with the workers. Neil, the Secretary General of the British National Cooperative Representative Organization Cooperative Union, grouping all kinds of cooperatives but mainly consumer ones, was among the main supporters of this idea of including the workers into the membership of cooperatives in general, but he met a lot of resistance. In 1892, at the occasion of the annual British Cooperative Congress, George Jacob Holyoake, one of the main promoters of the Rochdale Cooperative, but also another strong supporters of the idea of including the workers in the membership of all cooperatives, went as far as comparing those who did not agree with including this idea to those who opposed the emancipation of slave labor in America. Well, this may sound a bit extreme, but it gives an idea of the temperature of the debate at that time. Holyoake then included this speech in a book he wrote on the Rochdale Cooperative, which was widely disseminated at the time within the British cooperative movement and was translated into other European languages. This issue of including the workers in all types of cooperatives then largely dominated the debates during the one-week Congress that established the International Cooperative Alliance, the ICA, in 1895 in London. After intense negotiations, in the end, the final Congress declaration upheld this idea, and it was again upheld in the following ICA Congress in Paris in 1896. The debates continued for a few more years until it was finally closed in 1910, and the issue of including the workers into the membership of non-worker cooperatives was shelved. This is partly due to the fact that the trend towards distinguishing cooperatives into different types, like consumer cooperatives or worker cooperatives, continued to deepen, but also to the fact that the consumer cooperatives dominated in the international cooperative movement at that time. Then half a century passed, one marked by fascism, Nazism, the two world wars, the interwar period, and the post-war reconstruction. Then, in the late 1950s, worker cooperatives began to be considered more seriously within the international cooperative movement after having suffered at best condescendence for decades. And at the same time, the concept of multi-stakeholder cooperatives re-emerged as well, but this time from the worker cooperative movement itself, and this time with concrete and successful experiences. First of all, the Mondragon cooperative group in Spain's Basque country, one of the 26 case studies examined in the book, made its first steps as a group in 1959 when a handful of grassroots worker cooperatives plus a consumer cooperative created a cooperative bank, a kind of development bank for the group. Since the beginning, 1/3 of the voting power in that cooperative bank has been in the hands of its staff, the remaining two-thirds being in the hands of the cooperatives that are members of the group. The same principle of granting a substantial amount of power to the workers in non-worker cooperatives within the Mondragon group can also be seen in the group's consumer cooperative Eroski, with 50% voting power granted to the workers, its R&D cooperative Ikerlan, its cooperative university Mondragon Universitatea, among others. All this is explained in detail in the chapter on Mondragon in the book Cooperativism at Work. More or less at the same time, in the 1960s, social cooperatives emerged in Italy mainly out of the worker cooperative movement. And this is explained in another chapter of Cooperativism at Work. Whereas one part of the Italian social cooperatives, like those that are presented in the book, and which focus on labor integration of disadvantaged workers, have the workers as the only category or the majority of members, other Italian social cooperatives focusing on community services integrate into their membership in a more significant way other types of members than the workers, like volunteers, users of the services provided, foundations, associations, and in some cases even local governments, but always with minority powers. The rationale behind this model is to integrate the main stakeholders of the cooperative in a given community into its membership. As we can see, there is a close relation between A, the notion of multi-stakeholder cooperative, and B, the notion of community. And this close relation between multi-stakeholder cooperativism and community was then reinforced by a new trend within the international cooperative movement, focusing on the concept of community in relation with cooperatives. In 1979, the report Cooperatives in the Year 2000, drafted by Alexander Laidlaw, discussed in depth the concept of community related to cooperatives. This eventually led to the elaboration and approval in 1995 of the seventh cooperative principle of concern for community. This principle has since then provided a strong boost and justification for the global development of social cooperatives, which go as far as considering in their own complementary standards approved in 2011 that this principle of concern for community is the paramount principle guiding them. And this has also strongly boosted among social cooperatives the multi-stakeholder governance, which, as I said, is closely linked to the notion of community. In some legislations, like in France, with a collective interest cooperative society, which is the French version of social cooperatives, it is compulsory to have at least 3 distinct types of members, each one with a substantial amount of voting power in the General Assembly through separate colleges. Other social cooperative models with specific laws and having a multi-stakeholder structure exist, for example, in Canada, in Portugal, and in South Korea. The fact that multi-stakeholder cooperatives are beginning to become statistically significant globally is reflected by the recognition by the ILO in terms of cooperative statistics. Indeed, in 2018, the ILO Conference of Labor Statisticians, which meets every 5 years, published the guidelines concerning statistics of cooperatives, which distinguishes 4 basic types of cooperatives: producer cooperatives, users cooperatives, including consumer cooperatives and cooperative banks, worker cooperatives, and multi-stakeholder cooperatives. It is interesting to observe that this multi-stakeholder cooperative phenomenon has not only been applied by worker-owned cooperatives, worker cooperatives and social cooperatives, but also to cooperatives belonging to other big families of cooperatives like consumer cooperatives and cooperative banks, as the Mondragon experience has shown with undeniable entrepreneurial success. This tends to suggest that including the workers in the membership and the governance of cooperatives of all types can reinforce the entrepreneurial edge of these cooperatives. It is probable that when you grant part of the cooperative's decision-making power to those who will implement those decisions, namely the workers, you are actually reinforcing the link and the coherence along the decision implementation process. On the other hand, the multi-stakeholder cooperative governance is one of the key ways to implement the seventh cooperative principle of concern for community. And today, in our very troubled world, the sustainable development of grassroots communities is more needed than ever. Cooperatives can significantly contribute to that. As we can see, the issue of multi-stakeholder cooperatives as a key way to reinforce communities really concerns the cooperative movement as a whole. All this is discussed in more depth in the book Cooperativism at Work. As I said, you can find another video introducing the book, generally speaking, in the same YouTube channel. Thank you very much for your attention.